Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Preventing Decline, where you know by now our focus is to help older adults, millions upon millions of older adults, to age their absolute best, to live their best life, to remain independent, to stay confident, and most importantly, to prevent decline. Today, we have with us a special guest, Kevin Weston. Kevin, welcome to the show. You're an exercise physiologist, and I'm super excited to dive in on this topic.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, great to be here.
Kevin, so I know you didn't just stumble into exercise. You didn't just sort of say, oh, I got to find a job. You've been focused on this from undergrad work to graduate work. Tell me about your journey to becoming what I'll just call an exercise specialist.
Yeah. So basically, my story is very similar to a lot of people that get into the industry. It really started off with once I I played sports my whole life. I was very active my whole life. But once I broke away from having to, you're just athletic and fit just because of your youthfulness, and you started to age, and you kind of noticed wow, I might have to actually put some work into this, and if I want to feel healthy, and that happened as early as in my mid-20s. I was just kind of noticing just changes in my body, just how I felt, my energy levels, my mood, and this was obviously during the time that I was doing my generals in college, and I took classes, and I just was fascinated by the human body, and there was a time I thought about going into med school or dental school, and finally when I was sitting in my undergrad classes for my exercise science degree, and one of the instructors asked the class, how many of you're going to go to med school, and half the class raises their hand, and how many of you are going to go to dental school, and a fourth raise their hand, and how many of you are going to stay in exercise physiology, and there was me and two other people that raised their hand. And that was when I first noticed that, wow, I'm very much in a niche kind of industry that everyone knows is important, but for whatever reason, it's not one that's, it's an industry that people, they do it because they love to help people. It's not only because oh yeah, it's an incredible income or whatever, but I've been able to find a love and a passion to help people to live their healthiest lives possible. And that includes what I specialize in, which is working with a lot of mid to older adult, populations, people that aren't exercising per se, just to kind of get back into their skinny jeans, but they're noticing that what, I'm seeing my quality of life deteriorate, and I want to do the small and simple things that will help slow that progression. And so that's what my expertise is in, and that's what I'm excited to talk about today.
So, Kevin, a lot of people have asked me, what's with the preventing decline? What's with that title? And I say, look, as we get older, our bodies decline. That is the status quo. That is what we are genetically programmed to do as we get older, right? We get stiffer. We don't think as quick. Right? We lose hearing, we lose vision. There are all sorts of things that happen as we get older. So decline is the state of what happens to our body as we get older, but you truly can prevent it. And, you talk about exercise. You're right. It's not just about a diet or a fad or getting into your skinny jeans. I like that. What does exercise do for the body and mind overall, right? I'm not talking about lifting weights and getting jacked. I'm talking about just feeling good. I mean, what does that do for your body?
Well, it does a number of things. I mean, if you could get the benefits of exercise in a pill form, it would be the most prescribed medication in healthcare today, without a doubt, because of what it does. Not just from the physicality standpoint that you're addressing, but also from the mental, I've never had, a client that I've worked with finish up with a training session and walk out saying man, I feel much worse now than I did when I walked in. They always say,
you pretty much have a 100% success rate, right? You go in, you exercise 100% of the time, you walk out and you're like, I feel great.
Absolutely. But the pet peeve I have with the industry is everyone always wants to think about the end goal all the time. They always want to think about 6 months down the road rather than saying, okay, yeah, we're going to get there. But man, in the next 30 minutes or the next 45 minutes, you are going to have a dopamine, adrenaline kick that, you can only get through a pharmaceutical, but you're going to get through the natural movement of your body, but it takes effort, it takes work, it takes determination and consistency to do those small simple things on a consistent basis, because that's something I also want to hopefully address today, is just helping people to be consistent in their behaviors.
Well, right. It's, this is common sense, right? Like the sky is up, the sky is blue. I mean, there are some things in our world that are totally common sense, universal. Everybody knows it, including eating healthy and exercising. Yet most people don't do that. Why not? Have you figured that out yet?
Well, it's funny because, in my training, in my formal training, you learn all about, exercise physiology and biomechanics and, nutrition and all these different things. But if I could go back in a time machine and go to these different universities and look at their curriculum, I'd say, can we please have more courses on human behavior? Because it's that human behavior of, I mean, if I had a dime for every time I had a client say, Kevin, I know what I need to do, I just don't do it, and I need your help. I mean, there's very few times you hear that where, people say, hey, I have all the answers to the tests, I just don't really want to take the tests right now, and so at the end of the day, it's because it's hard, it's challenging. People look at exercise through the lens of, I have to only do this hard work so I get the reward, and if I don't do the hard work, I'm going to get punished by weight gain or whatever. So it's very much a kind of a psychology aspect of what gets people to tick and what gets people to kind of take that first step and then the next step and then the next step to where they have a complete buy-in to the process, to where now we have them to where, okay, they're truly making the lifestyle change, which is the phrase that, everyone hears ad nauseum about, oh, it's a lifestyle. But how do you get person A, person B, person C, person D to buy into a lifestyle that's healthier than what they're currently doing, that they're willing to do until their last breath?
And so that I want to focus on that, right? By the way, I love this sense of exercise psychology that we're talking about here. What do you know? Because this is new to me, right? I've been studying cognitive decline, dementia for many years now, but I'll be completely honest. I've read about it, but I don't fully understand it. What are the connections of exercise, being physically active? Because, it's not always about exercise, but being physically active, how does that tie to cognition, to memory as we get older? What do you know about that?
Well, if I could give this whole podcast just a nice tagline and the take-home message of, if no one listens to anything else that comes out of my mouth, listen to this phrase, and that is, if it's good for the heart, it's good for the brain. Okay. So in the same way that exercise helps to strengthen your heart, which is a muscle, is very much runs parallel to how it helps, brain function, because, exercise in a nutshell is a stimulus. Our bodies are in homeostasis where it's like, okay, this is our happy stage, that the body's in. It doesn't like to change things up, doesn't want to, mess up the apple cart. And so when you do a bout of physical activity that takes you out of homeostasis, that takes one out of its comfort zone, it's going to increase blood flow to the brain. Okay. And so when you increase blood flow to the brain, you're going to increase the cells in the brain. You're going to create new blood vessels, and that's going to help to support the growth and protection of new and existing, neurons.
Which is so important, right? Because a leading cause of dementia, which is vascular dementia. I mean, it's so easy to describe vascular dementia, which is a lack of blood supply to the brain over time that just keeps killing cells because it doesn't have enough oxygen. It becomes completely starved. And so physical activity, exercise can really physiologically fight back against that decline.
And now I'd make the argument that it has to. I mean, if someone goes for a walk outside and the sidewalk's kind of going up, there's an incline, and so you're walking up that incline, it is a guaranteed physiological response that your heart rate's going to go up. And when your heart rate goes up, it's going to increase blood flow. And so like it has to happen. I've never had anyone that's like, oh wow, I went from walking to jogging to running and my heart rate didn't change. Like it always changes,
Right.
So
let me ask you, right? Because what a lot of people worry about, and you already hinted at it, is where do I start? Right? Does it matter what type of exercise I do? I listen to this podcast, do I need to sign up for a gym? Do
No.
I need personal, exercise coaching? Do I need a personal trainer? What are some of the easy steps? What's the spectrum, if you will, of exercise?
So, and this doesn't go across everyone because, I do assessments and I try to kind of be very individual with my approach based upon who's sitting in front of me. But usually I would start off with differentiating between physical activity and then structured exercise. So most people, I feel, need to kind of, if they're sedentary and they're not really active at all, I would start off with just being more physically active, which to me is going out and walking. Walking is free. It's something that most people can do. If they can't, we can find some other modalities that would work for them. But just finding opportunities to sit less, to stand more, to move your extremities more. And the most basic human movement that we do is walking. And I would start with that approach, and you're trying to kind of build off the behavior of that as being the first step, is just walking more on a consistent basis. The American College of Sports Medicine, recommends about 150 minutes per week, which is easy. That's 30 minutes a day. But they've also found research that says, if that's all you're doing is 30 minutes of walking, but the other 23 and a half hours of the day, you're either sleeping or sitting at a computer or sitting on a couch, the benefits are very, they're going to be negated and they're going to be minimal. So you're just finding every excuse to, whether it be, we in the industry, we call it NEAT. It's non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So that's basically, when you're pacing, when you're fidgeting, when you're doing those things, add up in terms of energy expenditure that helps to improve your overall movement. But that's a basis to where, that's only going to get you so far in terms of lowering your risk for certain chronic diseases. But beyond that, that's where I'd say now let's morph into more structured exercise that's going to help to improve your strength, improve your cardiovascular function, improve your brain function, based upon if someone really need to start as small as possible.
So I love what you're getting at. By the way, I have a chapter in my recent book titled Preventing Decline, which is all about how sitting is the new smoking, right? Because of what it does to your body, because of what it does to your lungs, because of what it does to your heart and your brain long term. It's really, that comfy chair could actually be killing you. And I know people will think, oh, well, that's a little crazy. Trust me, do the research. Like you said, it's great if you walk a half hour, but if the other 23 and a half hours, you're sitting around watching TV, you're pretty sedentary, well, then it pretty much does negate those effects. So I like what you said. You started to talk about the individual customized plan. And I think that's so important, especially in older adults, because right, you can't just say, all right, well, get up and start running, start walking, then jogging, then running. Like everybody's needs are different. The older adult population is so diverse, be it, is there pre-existing cardiovascular disease, diabetes, anything that might be going on. So what does that customization look like?
Well, just like what you said, and then for most mid-older adults, there's also going to be orthopedic issues that they're having to work through. They'll say, Kevin, if I walk more than 30 minutes, like my knee kills me, my hip kills me, I start to my lower back. And so As movement specialists, we try to find ways that, regardless of what your medical history is, you're not exempt from movement. Like there's always going to be a way for you to move more. And you might have a tougher hill to climb compared to, your peers, but there's always a way to incorporate more movement in anyone's day. Many times you just have to think, a little bit outside the box. But if we start first with finding something that's more aerobic, so aerobic meaning with oxygen, is usually going to be a better place to start, to try to train the body to start training, to train the body to get out of that homeostasis of, okay, we're not just going to do the same things we've always been doing for the past 20, 30, 40 years, but we are going to incorporate certain movement patterns that the body says, oh my gosh, like this person has been moving for 2 weeks straight, now 3 weeks, now a month, 2 months, 6 months. Like this is going to be the new norm. We want to kind of build that process to where the body can actually handle, greater dosages of exercise. And that's where we start to incorporate some strength training as well. And that's where a combination of both aerobic and anaerobic exercise, so cardiovascular and strength training, is really kind of the two-headed. And actually, I would throw in flexibility and stretching as well into there. It's kind of the three-headed monster that will help to improve one's quality of life as well as cognitive function.
Well, I like what you said there. Rarely, if ever, does a medical condition preclude you from exercising, right? I'm sure there are exceptions to that rule. Talk to your doctor. But in general, whether it be diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease, I mean, you name it, exercise is pretty much a good thing. I want to ask you also, we're about to wrap up here. What do you know about, I've been doing a lot of reading recently on vitamin D2 and K3 for joint support, because joint support is very important in older adults, especially in the female population where they are more at risk with brittle bones if they fall, hip replacement. So what are your thoughts on supplementing exercise and good diet with certain vitamins?
Yeah, no, I'm all for that, because what we do know with most supplementation is it's not going to make your situation worse. The worst it might do is, I didn't really get the desired benefits that I was seeking. And so, my clients, a lot of them that are on certain types of supplementation, and say, keep on taking it. It's most likely not going to hurt you. If anything, it's just not going to get you to what you're hoping to be at, after taking it for, a certain amount of weeks. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about older adults that are, most likely have osteopenia and they're trying to prevent developing osteoporosis, it's going to be a combination of the supplementation, their diet, getting enough calcium, magnesium, but they have to do some type of weight-bearing exercise. And walking on the ground, on earth, is a form of weight-bearing exercise that if you don't do, there comes a point where it just makes it much harder to reverse that course to where that person, would have been able to be in a better place if they had started, years ago as compared to just starting now. So it's like the old adage, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the next best time to plant a tree? Today. So the goal is to get people to say, if I just start taking action right now, even if it's just something small, it can be much more advantageous than if they say, I'm just going to kind of keep on doing what I've always been doing and getting the results that they've always have gotten, and then being more and more frustrated with where they're at.
Well, I love what you said there, right? Gravity is essentially this built-in form of exercise. Because of it, all we got to do is get up and walk. And if you see a little bit of a hill, it's okay to go up it. It's okay to get your heart going, right? Park a little bit further away. You hear all these adages of, if you go to the mall, park a little bit further away. Do what you can to stay physically active, because that physical activity helps your heart and it absolutely helps your brain. And that's what we're about here, is preventing decline, whether it be social, emotional, physical, or cognitive decline, which again, that is the status quo if we do nothing as we get older. And so it is upon us to prevent it. And I appreciate what you said. You can't look backwards. Yes, maybe you should have planted that tree 20 years ago. Yes, maybe you should have started exercising 20 years ago, but that's not an excuse to not start today. And you can start small, and no matter what community you're in, right? I'm sure Kevin would love if you reached out to him, but there's also people in your own community that can help you to get started, to kickstart that process. So, Kevin, thank you so much for being here. Any parting words of wisdom?
Yeah, really the only thing I'd like to kind of just end off with is everyone is capable of doing something. Everyone is capable of improvement in their life. No one has peaked in terms of what they can do physically, emotionally, mentally, socially. And so if there's elements in your life where you want to have a higher quality of life, you have the power and the ability and the capacity to take that step forward. And there are professionals and people that are more than willing to help you to reach that potential to where you are living the life that you want to live and that you see yourself living.
Perfect. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today on Preventing Decline, and thank you for everything you do for the people in your community in Southern Utah and for all those people out there listening. Thank you.
Thank you.